Good evening, everybody, and welcome to History Bite number 11, dated August the 18th, 2020. I'm Walter, your mobile historian and blue-collar scholar. This History Bite is entitled The Presidential Election of 1796. Yes, you heard me correctly, 1796. So as we're deep into the 2020 presidential election cycle, 1796 stands out to me because it was, in my humble opinion, a landmark election in American history. First and foremost, it was only the third presidential election in American history, the priors being in 1792 and 1789. Next, it was the very first presidential election in which political parties were involved and nominated candidates. Indeed. And last but not least, it was the first and only presidential election where the winner and the loser, who would ultimately become president and vice president, were of different political parties. Imagine a president and vice president today being of different political parties. Personally, I can't imagine that. So, in the presidential election of 1796, we see the two-party system in America finally take root. On the Federalist side, we have the nominated candidate, Vice President John Adams. On the Democratic-Republican side, we have the nominated candidate, former Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson. The election was a nasty one. Vicious verbal barbs, slander, all that you can imagine was thrown by the camps of either candidate at the other. Though personally, the two candidates themselves, Adams and Jefferson, never actively campaigned for the office, their camps took care of all the work. Adams' camp directly threw assertions at Jefferson's folks that they were too close to the violent French revolutionaries, something that could, quite arguably, undermine the stability of America as a nation. They also attacked Jefferson's personal character, calling him a coward, an atheist, and a litany of different other less than sweet words. Jefferson's folks, in turn, attacked Adams's camp, calling the Federalists pro-British, pro-monarchist, and pro-aristocratic dominated. All right? Frankly, the Jeffersonians thought that the Federalist Party was much too close to the ideologies of Alexander Hamilton, whom we've talked about in other history bites. And they thought that the Federalists were simply aiming to establish another Great Britain here in America. And by contrast, the Federalists thought that the Democratic Republicans, led by Jefferson, were trying to establish an America modeled after revolutionary France. In essence, they despised each other, not the two men personally, but their respective camps. When all was said and done, in the Electoral College, John Adams, who was vice president to George Washington, barely won the presidency with 71 electoral votes. In second place, Thomas Jefferson of the Democratic-Republican Party won 68 electoral votes, making Adams the new president and Thomas Jefferson the new vice president. Adams was a Federalist, Jefferson a Democratic-Republican. And so for the next 4 years, you would have a president and vice president of competing political parties, something that would temporarily destroy the long friendship between Adams and Jefferson, something that would not be renewed until years later. But in the election of 1800, we see virtually the same scenario play out as would happen in the presidential election of 1796. But in the election of 1800, Jefferson would ultimately prevail, but only after a contentious, numerous amount of votes in the House of Representatives to break a tie between him and Aaron Burr. Both Jefferson and Burr had got 73 electoral votes. Adams got 65 in the Electoral College with the election of 1800. But back to 1796 indeed. So I say this was the first modern election in American history with political parties that was contested, and one where lots of very, very rude, nasty, evil, unpleasant things were thrown in between the competing camps and the rivals running for office. Okay, so 1796, in my opinion, was the foundation presidential election for almost all future presidential elections in the United States. Any questions about the 1796 election in which John Adams won over Thomas Jefferson? Hit me up in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this history bite, and I'll talk to you at the next one. Have a great day.